Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards, because we are the best, and we're not wizards, no matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for... Is it March? Is it February? We don't know. This could be released any time at all. It could be Monday, it could be a Tuesday, it could be a Friday, it could be a Saturday, it could be no day at all. But because at the end of the day, it's your podcast. Now, joining me today is a gentleman who... If you rolled some dice, there's a potentiality that he's not just going to take an action, he's going to write something down. It's a guy who he likes his rolls and writes. He likes dealing with inkwells. This man is Joey Schouten, and he is part of Inkwell Games, and he specialises in the roll and write genre, which is it's very hot and very interesting and very exciting. So we thought we'd have him on to have a chat. So, hello, Joey.
Hi, Richard. Hi. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Been looking forward to this for a while. How are you doing? First of all, are you well? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm doing great. We've been having lovely weather around here. Very much spring weather. So
Yeah.
It's been well, taking walks on the beach and whatnot. It's been lovely. So, I can't complain, really.
That's good. Have you had the really hot weather? Because we've been having days where it's hit the 50s in terms of temperature. 54, 55, 56 Fahrenheit, or about, which is about, 15 to 20 degrees, which we normally never ever get in February. It's absolute kind of madness. And then today it went down to 4 degrees, so it got to be really, really cold. And so it's not the kind of the best. I guess we should do the kind of the admin bit for people who haven't joined us for the first time. Thank you for joining us. The reason that we do this is because I like speaking to people. And if you like doing something, as long as it's legal, it's a perfectly good excuse to keep doing those things. And the other reason that we do this is, as I say, me and Joey kind of spoke back and forward over the last kind of 3-4 months, and we wanted to have a chat. And he, as I say, he's involved in he's head of development at Inkwell Games, and they specialise. They do quite a few things, but one of the things they deal with is kind of roll and write games. So it's been a very popular genre, so we thought we'd get an expert on to kind of talk about it. But before we do that, we want to find out a little bit about your history with a hobby. So you want to tell us a little bit about how you got involved?
Yeah, I used to be in a very, very far away past. Used to be basically just a Magic player. When I was small, when I was a tiny kid of 8 or 9, I picked up Magic cards. They ended up in a shoebox in the attic for 10 years. And when I was about 16, 17, I found the shoebox again. And it happened that all my friends also played Magic and whatnot. So we got really into Magic, into all of that cardboard. Mm-hmm. And then one day, the people I regularly play with invited me over to play Ascension, which is this deck building game, which is on the one hand really different. On the other hand, you're still shuffling cardboard around. And even though there was a bit of a weird game night, we were there with 8 or 9 people playing literally the same games with a downtime in double digits. It stuck. So from then on, basically, I started moving into board games more and more. And that's been about 12 years ago. And since then, I've been trying out more and more board games, doing more stuff. And, over the past decade, I've collected a decent amount of board games.
How many's a decent amount? You don't get away with saying it's a decent amount. We want numbers, Joey. We want facts. We want figures.
We want numbers, we want facts. Well, I want to bet that I easily hit over 50.
You're just an amateur then.
Yeah. But that's also not really counting all of the roll and rights, because that's a lot. That's at least over 30 on its own, and it's really coming in maybe 70, 80.
Wow. That is a reasonable number. What have you still got your magic cards then? Or did you do the right thing and kind of burn them and then bury them in the ground, or do you still have that kind of shoebox kind of full of them?
I passed on the entire collection to my little brother at some point.
Wow.
I moved to Amsterdam. And in Amsterdam, I went there to go study. There wasn't that much of a magic scene, funnily enough. That's very much living room magic, and it wasn't really a game store where you could play. So I didn't really play that much, and I just basically gave them all to my little brother, and he's still having tons of fun with it. Still play a bit online on Magic Arena or whatnot, but it's one of those lifestyle games I just don't really have the time for anymore. There's so much effort and preparation that goes into what's actually just playing a game of cards. I don't have the time for it. I'd rather play stuff like Keyforge now, or just board games, because I don't need to spend hours on the internet or shuffling through shoeboxes to get a game together, really.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that, because I know some people that all they did for years was just play Magic, and then once you kind of scratch the surface of it, and once you kind of get involved with it, you can see why. It's almost like, do you know when people have they buy a PlayStation, and they're the type of people that they have a copy of FIFA, the latest football game, or a copy of Call of Duty, and you're like, well, why is it you've only got that? You haven't got anything else. And I think Magic is kind of can be like that. There are just people that all they do is play Magic, and if they're not playing Magic, then they're organising decks, and if they're not organising decks, then they're kind of searching for the stuff that they want to get their hands on, kind of thing. So it's kind of interesting. Was there cards in the collection that you gave to your brother that were kind of worth anything at all, or was it not really something you even were fussed about?
I wasn't really fussed about it, because he was still a very active player, and if you're brothers living in the same house, both playing the same game, the collections are gonna mingle in any case. So there was all sorts of stuff in there that was just still useful, and that he still plays with right now, and that's just fine. You have people that play these kind of games for the money, who go in this card is worth $50, and I'm gonna hold on to it and try to resell it. The entire finance section in Magic. That's something I did for a while, selling cards online and buying them. But when I quit, it was kind of I just want to be done with it, because it's just too much at some point. It eats up all your time, and even though I went back to other trading card games after. It luckily never got that bad, because Magic has the problem is that you can play it in a gazillion ways. So once you're done playing one version of Magic, you go play with other people, play the other version of Magic, and so you're basically just playing the same game 5 different ways. And it just,
who's better between you and your brother? Who's the better Magic player?
By now, he's the way better Magic player.
Really?
Yeah.
I bet he makes you aware of that as well. I bet he constantly reminds you that he's a better player. Well,
sort of. Sometimes I see him play. I'm I have no idea what you're doing, but you're winning very well. And sometimes I play what they call limited, which is when you don't have the cards from your shoebox beforehand, but you open packs basically. And you do that digitally, so you collect your deck to play with as you go along. It's a game in itself. and he just manages to build stuff that just wins. And I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing anymore. Like, it's fun, but I'm not really winning lots.
I think the meta changes quite a bit. I think it's kind of one of these games where they're proactively changing the meta and the things that can win a game and kind of change it round, and they're introducing kind of new mechanics to kind of keep it kind of fresh. You mentioned Keyforge.
Yeah.
Have you been playing that quite a bit then? Have you been getting involved in Keyforge a little bit?
Oh, what I really like about Keyforge is that I have 3 decks, and that's it. I don't need more.
Yeah.
But the really nice thing about it is everybody has it, basically. If I put it in my bag and I show up somewhere, if I go to my D&D night, everybody has Keyforge, so we usually get a game or 2 in before we actually get to play, waiting for other people. Yeah. If I go to the local game store for board game night, it's the same case. Everybody has it. So it's less of a lifestyle game in that sense, more of a connecting kind of thing, because no matter what you usually play, you can play Keyforge. Yeah, which is really nice. And I've been playing it decent amount, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, I think what I like about it is that you can have 2 people who have never ever played the kind of a deck, and you can swap decks quite easily. But it's not like you can go away and you could make changes to your deck, so the following week, you've improved your deck so you can definitely win. I think it's one of these things, you learn more about the deck, and you learn its strengths and weaknesses, and you learn how to win kind of that way. And I think that's kind of fresh, and the fact that you could kind of unpack a deck just now and still have a really, really good game, regardless of maybe how the deck is, especially if it's like 2 fresh decks, which I know people would say, well, you can do that in Magic, you just do it like a blind drafting, in Magic, and you get the same thing. But at least, in Keyforge, the decks have been kind of slightly engineered, to kind of maybe complement each other, which is kind of cool. And you're right, you don't have to buy, if you've got 3 decks, what's that, 20, 30 euros or something that you've spent?
Yeah, something along those lines, yeah.
Yeah, and if you're talking Magic, you could be sinking $30, 30 euros, whatever, into just getting set up for the first time, and then be encouraged to go out and automatically buy a couple of sets. So it's pretty kind of cool. You mentioned after kind of abandoning kind of Magic and putting that to one side, you started kind of getting more into the kind of the board game kind of scene.
Yeah.
Is there anything recently that you've been playing, you've been getting to the table, you've kind of really been kind of enjoying?
Oh yeah, lots of stuff. Like this year, I've met new people who actually have a lot of the Hero classics. Stuff like viticulture, whatnot, scythe, and so on. So I'm now finally really diving into those things because I don't have them myself. And I've been really enjoying those cube shufflers, basically. And yeah, they're great. Like Concordia, I've been playing, and I just love it because I'm very much from a merry, trashy angle in a sense with trading card games, and I think I have World of Warcraft, the board game, in my shelf, and that kind of nonsense. Like, and then going back to to Euros and all of those things. I bought Bear Park just the other month because it's kind of like I really need to get myself a tile placement game or whatnot. So I'm just, even though I've been playing board games and actually getting into it for quite a few years, I'm still just exploring so much because there is so much to get through, basically.
Is there anything you'd like to get your hands on? Have you seen any games quite recently that you'd like to kind of play, to kind of get hold of and get to the table?
Root. I really want to go play Root. And luckily I have friends who recently bought it, so I'm going to play it soon. But that's one of those games, like every time I'm at the board game store, I'm like, I want this game. But, it's one of those games that everybody at the table will want to play it because it's asymmetrical. You don't have the same rules for everybody. So everybody needs to learn the game in their own way, basically. Which is a bit hard with the people I usually play with. But luckily, I'm going to get that to the table soon, at least. But that's one of the games I really want to get still.
What's attractive about it? Is it the gameplay or is it the artwork? Because...
both.
Yeah.
Because it looks lovely. It looks amazing. It's so pretty. And it's just amazing. But I also... my background is in serious gaming and whatnot. That's what I'm studying, technically.
Oh, right. Okay.
And it has this background in war games and these counterinsurgency stuff and whatnot. And I find it really interesting, but that real stuff, the real deal, the GMT games, the Hollandspiele, whatnot, is a bit dense. And if I were to get that and I show up, hey, who wants to, replay the French-Algerian War? Everybody's like, eh. But, if you show up, who wants to do some woodland insurrection, to kill animals? Everybody's like, yeah, let's do it. So it's the same kind of, in a sense, the same kind of idea of stuff that you're going through, but in an entirely different coding, basically, entirely different theme, which is a lot more attractive and a lot more playable. And with board games, like, if you can't get them to the table, because of the people you play with, why do you have them then? They're meant to be played, really.
Yeah, I think recently I've known of quite a number of friends that I know through the industry that are actively saying they're going through their collections and they're being quite ruthless with them, and they're actively cleaning out kind of games that they know that they're not going to get to the table, like the trophy games.
Yeah.
So I know of people that have, because you see it now and again, I'll see people like, selling a copy of Scythe or selling a copy of Rising Sun or, games like Feudum or something like that, and you're just like, but these are, they're all really, really highly rated, highly kind of renowned, kind of, pretty well critically received games, and it's kind of like, why are you getting rid of them? It's like, well, I'll never get them to the table, so what's the point? I've spent, €70 on something I'm never actually ever going to play. I mean, that's kind of like pointless. I see a lot of people kind of going through this kind of clearing out phase. I don't know if that's just one of these, I think that's just one of these things that kind of happens, is that if you're looking at your board game shelf, it's fairly obvious to you if you're looking at it what you've played and what you've not played. Yeah. And I think it's always there, it's always right facing you, it's always in the corner, it's always kind of staring at you saying, I've not been played yet, why have you not played me? And you're just like that. I don't know why. So I think I've seen a few kind of getting it, but yeah, you should. I've got Root, I've got the expansion, I'm planning on getting whatever else Leader Games kind of gets, because Root is kind of pretty much one of my favourites, and I see all the love it gets. And also I'm kind of gently laughing because I know there's probably a whole load of people that would really, really love coin games. If they maybe, and I'm sure GMT are thinking, should we do a warm, fluffy, puppies versus kittens kind of version, and just reskin one of the games that we've got instead? And I'm wondering if they're kind of maybe, it's maybe not the mechanics, it's maybe the theme. What got you into the roll and write kind of genre? What was your story with that, Joey?
Oh yeah. Well, basically, I actually didn't like him at first, and my partner really loves them. And at some point, they were like, "Oh, do you want to play Quicks?" Sure, played it a few times. It's kind of like, nah, it's okay. Put it down, and didn't play it for a few months. We got back to it later, and we played more of it. And then at Essen in 2017, we bought Harvest Dice, which I enjoyed more, mainly because I started to appreciate it. And I sort of, like, at some point, we just started collecting them because I started to like them more and more and more because they're really light games basically, and if you're like me from like this background of playing either a bit heavier games, more complex games or whatnot, you don't always appreciate the lighter stuff. So I learned to appreciate them basically, and what then happened at some point was like, you know what, I'm just going to design one. And instead of just jumping in, I was like, you know what I'm going to do first though, I'm going to like research, I'm going to see what's out there. So that stack of like 2 and 3 roll and writes became 20, became 30, became 40,
Wow.
and looking print and plays and like dissecting them, seeing what kind of mechanics are in there and whatnot, and writing up a bit about it, you know, for my own reference. And before I knew it, it was basically just down this rabbit hole of roll and writes. Like, oh man, I know a lot about roll and writes now. Oops. so yeah, it was really, you know, funny in a way that, you know, it's just it's something that couldn't have happened with any other kind of games. Basically, you know, this could only have happened with like the €10 roll and write games. You don't go like, oops, I bought 20, deck building games, or like, oops, I bought €20. It doesn't really happen that way in like half a year. So, that actually happened. And, so it's really silly when people go like, oh, you must love them. You must have always loved them. No, I just literally didn't like them at first. And
fell down a rabbit hole and then kind of kept on collecting them.
Basically.
For people that are listening and they're saying, I've heard this phrase roll and write, but I have no idea actually what a roll and write is. Could you maybe give people, I guess, the kind of the quick introduction if they're sitting there and going, you know, Alley Cat Games did a roll and write. They did their Welcome to Dino World roll and write, and it was very, very popular. But what's a roll and write?
So roll and writes are basically small dice games. Like we're going to expand on this, but like for now, they're dice games. Kind of like you have dice, you roll them, you do something with them, and you write the results down on a sheet. And that basically to the bones is what basically roll and write is. And it's not doing it justice, basically. If you have games like Quicks, it's basically roll dice, you get to add dice, you get to mark stuff off on a track, and the more crosses you manage to get on the tracks is how many points you get. And that basically, at face value, is what a roll and write is. But what it does, basically, is it's very specific in what you can and can't do. If you play Quicks, you basically have a line of numbers from 2 to 12, and it basically says if you cross off the 6, for example, you cannot cross off anything below that 6. So what you get is basically, yes, you just mark off stuff, but it has a meaning. You have to push your luck. What are the dice going to show you? What's the probability going to be? Whatnot. And basically trying to like do some set collection by adding up scores that way, trying to do a bit of pushing your luck. And what it basically makes that work is the fact that what you're writing down is permanent. So if you put down, like Yahtzee is a very old version of roll and writes, basically like the first. If you put down your score, you can't then go like, oh yeah, you know what? No, this my next turn. I really didn't want to do that. I'm just going to do this instead. So you have this sense of permanence, this sense of moving forward in your gameplay at all times. That, you know, is very, not so much unique to roll and writes, but it's the thing that makes it tick at the heart of it. And, but if you look at what it is, it's literally getting a random thing from like dice or cards and whatnot, doing something with it, and writing it down in like spaces or like crossing off stuff or whatnot, and that shows some kind of scoring mechanism.
Yeah, and the thing that I've noticed about them is that it can be down to the interpretation of what you do with the instructions. So, for instance, when I think it was it Rory Summers, he wrote a thing for Welcome to Dino World, and he said that what you could do is you rolled the dice and it told you whether you were putting down a dinosaur or whether you were putting down a facility, whether you were bringing in visitors, but then it was up to the individual to decide on their separate sheet of paper what they were doing with that. and then at the end of the day, everybody totted up their scores, and obviously the person that had... So it's almost like a resource. In some ways it can be like a resource management type of thing. Does it... With it being a simplistic kind of entry mechanic, you know, does it limit what can actually be done? Do people kind of expand on the basic roll and write and start to introduce like components and additional tokens and things like that when they're doing it?
Yeah. There's some bigger games, basically, like steamrollers. Like everybody has their sheets and there's dice involved, but also tokens and all sorts of other stuff. There's a dice game version of La Granja, which also has like tokens and tracks. You're moving resources up and down, all sorts of stuff. And what you see, well, there's been more complex ones over the years and more simpler ones over the years, but I do feel people are experimenting with what it means, basically. It's what you saw with Welcome to, for example. You know, that was a really big one. Yeah. Because it was one of the really big ones where we're like, no, we're not using dice, we're using a deck of cards. And what that means, because you have different probabilities for making different stacks, you get different choices because of it, with objective cards, all sorts of stuff. And I do feel that people are trying to do new things with it. And that's also, you know, I'm also working on some projects right now that are doing that as well. I'm working right now on a game that's basically a deck build and write. So you, instead of just rolling dice, you're deck building and then using what comes out of that to write. And so there's all sorts of different stuff you can do with it. As long as, you know, you go like, we're doing something that gives us a value and that's going to be written down somewhere. So there's lots of room where you can take all of the bits and do something new with it entirely.
So how did you get involved from kind of falling down the rabbit hole to kind of getting involved in kind of Inkwell Games? I mean, how did that kind of come about?
Oh, that's also a really long story. So the owner of my local game store also is a game designer. Well, used to design games and has published a few. And because he used to publish games, he has a store, so he's decently well connected. And he knew that I was working on all of this stuff. So at some point, I show up in the store, and he's like, hey, this publisher came by and told him about you, and here's his phone number. You can give him a phone call. So I did so, went to the publisher, you know, to the office, had a nice chat about roller rights and everything, which was lovely. You know, we'd see what we could do together. And what we wanted to do is basically make a book of roll and rights, in a sense. Long story short, you know, we ended up not doing that at that point. You know, it's we couldn't get it to work in a sense that would work for the publisher. And then I was sitting at home and I was like thinking, you know what? I'm going to do it myself. You know, why not? And this is no joke. It's too beautiful to be coincidence. The same day, I get a message from Odin Fong, the other half of Inkwell. Yeah. Hey, I want to make this book with roller ride games. Do you happen to know people?
Oh, dear.
So it's like, well, it's your lucky day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's how it started, really. And that's, you know, how we... got to know each other, you know, went to work together and, you know, at a breakneck pace, got everything set up, basically.
Did you find out where he had hidden the camera in your house from when he was spying on you then? Did you ever figure that out?
No, like I've been going through the house with this bug finder all day, but you know, all I found was faulty wiring, and you know, I never managed to find it. Now, maybe it was magic. Maybe, you know, who knows?
So in terms of the design of the games and putting together the book, did you decide then to completely design all the games that were going in the book yourselves, or have you kind of involved other people in kind of bringing the roll and write games together?
Well, what we're doing for this project, the Dyson Inc., the book, is that we just basically did a call for pitches. We were like, we have somebody who is going to do the publishing angle. We have somebody who knows a lot about roll and write games. And we'll just see, what designers are up for that, basically, to do this. We did a call for pitches, and we had really, lots of people showing up. Hey, I want to make a roll and write with you. Yeah. So we basically told them, send us a pitch of what you want to do. So don't send us your full game. Don't, if you have a game shelved, sure, fine. But just what do you want to do, and we'll see what we can do. And there were really, lots of response to that. And we basically, everybody that we felt like these are nice people did a quick background check, and we looked at what they wanted to do, as sort of what ideas they had, and we're like, yes or no. And so we are now with designers who are making a game. We're supporting them, doing play testing, providing feedback, and doing layouts and whatnot at a slightly later stage. We'll be doing external play testing for them and whatnot. Basically, we're working with designers who are making, who designed a roll and write, basically. Because making 20 or 25 games yourself is that's much.
That's just a little bit of it's a bit of a big ask, isn't it?
Yeah.
So is that why you're looking for things like Scrapyard Robot?
Yeah.
And Constellations as well.
Yeah.
You're kind of actively getting people externally to yourselves, kind of getting them to kind of play test it then. What's the response been like? I know it's obviously only been a couple of weeks since you've asked for help, but is there quite a vibrant kind of roll and write community on, say, Board Game Geek? I mean, is there a Facebook group for rolls and writes and things like that?
I have to be entirely honest. I'm only on Twitter. I don't do Facebook anymore because I've been in a few groups on Facebook, and I've left again because, sometimes the level on there was just, how do you say, not really high. Basically, maybe, the SpongeBob meme, is mayonnaise an instrument? Basically, that kind of level of discourse about roll and writes. Basically, there is a pencil involved. Is this a roll and write? And then, and it's really hard to get a nice discussion going or whatnot if you just have to keep going back to the same points over and over. So I left those groups again. Because it was just eating too much time, and I didn't really feel having to do the, explain what a roll and write is 20 times. Yeah, and Board Game Geek is just a place I use as a resource, really. I look up stuff, but I'm not active on Board Game Geek. It's a bit too, it's a bit too much, basically. Everything is on there, and a lot of games, a lot of forums, and the site is one mess, and navigating it is not my idea of a good time. I'm just using Twitter, basically. And on Twitter, at least, there's a really big community of people who love playing and making these games. People like Benny Sperling, Suzanne Sheldon is, of course, actually the roll and write expert. All sorts of people, and everybody is very much involved in it, and people are making all sorts of new things and talking to each other and whatnot. And if you basically just follow on Twitter, just have an alert for the term roll and write, you'll basically find everything already.
Okay.
And and it's a lot. It's very nice. And to illustrate basically how big it is, I did a roll and write jam last year with Robert David, also the designer of Tag City, which is a great game. Yeah. And we were like, you know what? Let's do a game jam. Let's have people make roll and writes, and we're gonna basically, jam it. And we were like, it's gonna be 20 games best. that's it. That, like how many people could there be? And we got almost 60 games.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a bit wow. Yeah, like we were completely overwhelmed, like completely. We had no idea what to do with so many games. All of a sudden, it was very much. So there is a lot more than you think, basically, because the medium is so accessible. All you need is a sheet of paper to design something on and some dice, really, to enter this arena. And if you look at, like, say, making a deck building game, there's so much design involved before you can actually start playing. Or like a very big complex Euro, there's so much design involved before you can, before you have something on the table. And roll and writes are really quick to iterate, really quick to get to the table. So it's because it's that accessible, everybody can join in, basically.
Do you think it's also down to like what we were talking about earlier about, having a pile of games that you've not played yet, and yet something like a roll and write is, it sounds like some of them, the barrier to entry is an awful lot lower. You're talking Yahtzee, which I suppose is, as you said, it was one of the original kind of roll and writes. So a lot of the roll and writes are a case of roll the dice, refer to the reference sheet, write down what you're going to be doing with the potential actions that you can kind of make. So it gives a kind of a low kind of barrier to entry. So there seems to be a lot more, not interest as such, but I think that as a genre it seems to have been highlighted an awful lot more in the last kind of 12 to 18 months. Have you noticed that yourself, that there's been a kind of a generally an awful lot more interest in the genre, or has it just been the case that, well, it's always been the same, it's just that it's the kind of, as a kind of a genre and a mechanic, it's kind of getting maybe a little bit more coverage than it used to?
I think it's a bit of everything that works with each other. A few years ago, like 2 years ago, the entire genre exploded. Basically, we got a lot of games all of a sudden.
Yeah.
If you go to Board Game Geek, sort per year, you see that like 2016, 17, 18, a lot more games than the years before. It's like, but not by like 20%, 30%, no, but even like, if you look at what's basically there from Yahtzee, which is from the 60s, still Quicks, which is 2012.
Yeah.
I think it's about 20.
Yeah.
And then if you look past 2012, like it could be 30 maybe, like, but it's not that much. And I think by now we have like managed to triple, maybe quadruple the amount of entries, if not actually more, in the entire genre, because it just picked up. And since 2012, when we had Quicks, it's basically like, oh, this is stuff we can actually do, in the sense that we can make new, really cool games.
Yeah.
I feel, and you had a lot of these German roll and writes coming out, and that you still have, like, all of the companies you see coming out now, companies like the Nürnberger Spieleverlag, who made Quicks and whatnot, and now have Quantum last year, and have new stuff coming up. They've got a game with Phil Walker Harding coming up this year. So the same companies still doing the same thing, just keep going on doing that, but so many more have entered the arena. But because there's so much more games basically now than it used to be, there's more coverage. Because there's more coverage, there's more players. Because there are more players, there's more, demand for it. So it feeds onto each other to basically increase. And then we also have apps now. where you can now put a roll and write on your phone.
Yeah, I suppose.
Which is what we see with Ganz Schön Clever and Doubled So Clever.
Sorry.
No. Like, those are games you actually need to play on your phone, to be honest.
Yeah, I suppose it makes it accessible as well, because I guess a roll and write is potentially a game that everybody could install on their phone, and then you could just join a group match, and then there'd be a central dice pool that would roll, and then you could carry out the actions within your phone itself. But I guess the other thing that would be attractive about a roll and write is, I guess, it kind of would be supported by a lot of the print and play kind of sites as well. That, I mean, let's face it, unless you're looking at absolutely kind of customized dice.
Well, if you look at like, there's a lot of print and play stuff happening. If you look at Button Shy, they did a board game of the month club with Robin Gibson, basically making these roll and write games that are just one sheet of paper, one every month, basically. If you look at and now Chris Anderson from Blue Cube Board Games is now picking up that mantle, basically, for this year with the entire diceless roll and writes, the Tempest series. If you look at Print and Play Arcade, which is a relatively new provider of print and play games, has a lot of roll and writes on their entire pinball series. All of the Button Shy stuff that was first on their own website is now on there. So there's like a lot of print and play happening. And if you go to Board Game Geek, there's also a lot of free print and plays just out there. Games like 30 Rails, Utopia Engine, although I can't really recommend that one. It's a bit baroque. It's a bit big. It's a bit, There's
overambitious.
A lot going on there. Let's put it like that. It's really nice for what it's trying to do, but people either love it or they don't. And I don't think there's an in-between, and I'm in the camp that doesn't like it.
It's really strange you've mentioned Chris Anderson, because literally 2 minutes before I started speaking to you, Joey, I was speaking to Chris about him coming on the show. So he's going to be making an appearance at some time at the end of March. So that's because you said, "Oh, Chris Anderson," you went, "All right, from Blue Cube," and I was like, "Oh, let me just check." And it's exactly the same person. So yeah, Chris is going to be he's going to be coming on. I think talking about the competition that they're going to be running. They're doing the design contest for 2019. So we're going to be having a chat later on into March about it. So that's kind of cool. In terms of you kind of designing yourself, I mean, is roll and write, is that going to be your jam? I mean, would you consider going into kind of anything else, any other type of genre? Is there still that kind of attraction to you, or has roll and write kind of really become your thing?
Yes and no. Like, roll and write is kind of really my thing, but I'm also doing other stuff, basically. The nice thing about roll and writes is you can easily get them as a side project as that chugs along. But I'm also doing other stuff. I'm working on this big dungeon crawler right now for this company here in Amsterdam. I have my own medium-weight Euro game that's been lying, basically not doing anything for half a year, but that one is based on like farming sims like Harvest Moon and Stardew Valley. Really need to see a new iteration. All sorts of stuff, really. I've got this basically this dice game lying around that is Elder Sign, but then bank robbing, that needs a retheme. There's so much that I have on my plate, basically, projects-wise, some active, some inactive. But the nice thing about roll and writes is they take relatively little time, or can be sort of like pressed into like lost hours, in a way that bigger projects can't. Really, I can't. If I have a really big dungeon crawler that takes 2 hours, I can go like, oh well, half an hour, let's do a playtest. But with roll and writes, the game takes 30 minutes at the most if you have people who need to think a lot. So you can work really quickly with that, and that's why I'll keep doing that. Especially, always will have one active that I'm working on. I'm actually working on 2 right now, but it's not something I will solely do. Basically,
I mean, is this something that you're kind of pushing towards making kind of like your full-time kind of career, your full-time job?
Basically, yeah. In my my background, like I'm still finishing up a master's in game studies. So I'm already in that arena, basically, sort of. But then not so much in board games. That was my own decision. But the entire game design is basically what I'm, in academically speaking as well. So,
All right.
Yeah, it would be great if it works. But, if it doesn't, there's lots of stuff, I can be doing. But it would be lovely, yeah.
Yeah. So your plan is you're bringing games to Kickstarter then? I mean, what's the plan with that then?
The plan with that is basically this first project, Dyson Inc., we're going to bring to Kickstarter, mainly because we're a new company, and because that way we can work with lower costs beforehand. Basically, we don't need to make a print run like of so many 100 copies before we before we have the funds for that and whatnot. And it's very, for us right now, it's a very safe way to test the waters, basically. And what I like about Kickstarter is it's basically like it's a crowdfunding platform, but for the board game world, it's basically one of the main outlets right now for board games. Yeah. That takes marketing, that takes effort. It's not like you have a built-in audience as soon as you open up Kickstarter. That's not how it works. But what's really nice about it is that, especially for a small company like us, or somebody who has designed a game and wants to bring it to people, is that there is still this possibility of doing that way. And the other way around is basically just printing it, spending a lot of money doing that, trying to get distribution and whatnot beforehand. It's very expensive to do, I think, right now. And that's why we're going for Kickstarter. And I think that Kickstarter basically is getting a bit full right now.
Oh, yeah.
What we've noticed, because we were trying to find a nice time to put our Kickstarter project, and
good luck with that.
Yeah, there are no more good times to put your game on, basically, because there's always a new one by Cool Mini or not. There's always this cool new thing, there's no more good times. There's times, but yeah.
There's guys that are becoming just regular, they're becoming regulars on Kickstarter. I mean, Alley Cat Games, for instance. I mean, they did Welcome to Dino World, but they've got Chocolate Factory on at the moment. They had Coral Island kind of before that, and so they seem to be constantly kind of have some kind of project running, and to date the stuff that they're putting out there seems to be kind of absolutely fantastic as well. And I think what we're starting to see is regular, it's not middle of the road guys, but I think we're seeing regular guys that aren't Cool Mini or not, kind of having regular kind of Kickstarters, guys that are making at least $70,000 or $80,000 on Kickstarter, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, as you say, what it means is that it's becoming a much tougher kind of situation for you just to avoid the 3 or 4 projects that the big guys are coming on, and you just have to, I guess, jump in with both feet and see how you're kind of getting on. But I guess one of the things with Kickstarter, and if it's going to be a rolling right that you're going to be doing, I guess that the cost for getting the games produced isn't going to be prohibitively expensive, I'm guessing.
No, as what I've been told and what I've also seen, expensive bits are the dice, the minis, the whatnot, cardboard to an extent, but mainly because you usually get it printed in China, then have to ship it over, and it's heavy. And but basically, the more components a game has, the more expensive it gets, which is a truism, obviously. And Roll and Ride's really light on that. That doesn't mean they're not projects like On Tour, which is a really big box full of cardboard and stuff that's actually pretty heavy for a roller ride. Or games like that feature custom dice and a lot of player boards and fancy markers and like making it a premium product. Even roll and rides you can make expensive if you want to, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're doing, we're saying that we're on Kickstarter, which is a certain audience, because the people who show up every once in a blue moon at the local board game store to buy Catan or Carcassonne are not on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
You're already talking to board game enthusiasts, and especially with something like roll and rides, because there's so much on offer already. The people who are going to show up to a Kickstarter and look at what you're doing are already the people who are interested in it.
Yes.
What we did, we made a decision, we're going to do a book, basically, rather than a boxed game. So it's a book with all sorts of games in it, different games, and you basically have the rules and the sheet. And we gave instructions to the designers. The dice and everything you use needs to be stuff people have lying around.
Yes.
Basically. And because these people are already board game enthusiasts, you can assume they have 6-sided dice around. You can assume that most likely they will have a polyhedral set. Don't ask for 20-sided dice. That's a bit much. But you can say, hey, get a 6-sided die and an 8-sided die. And what that does, basically, it allows us to print in places where you otherwise couldn't, because we're printing a book and not so much an entire board game that needs to be boxed with special labels and whatnot. So we're doing something really different than what people are usually doing in this space. Mainly because we don't need the components. We're just doing a book. And that is experimental, really. We also don't know how that's going to go, how people are going to really respond to that, because it's new. Nobody has went like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a book.
Yeah.
We're also really curious how that's going to go.
Cool. Now, I can only wish you kind of best of luck, kind of going forward with the project itself.
Mm-hmm.
If people have listened along tonight and they want to keep an eye on what you're up to and what you're doing, where can we find you on the interweb nets?
Well, you can find me on me personally on my Twitter account, which is at a Joey Vengeant, which is a horrible pun on a magic card. It's that old. And you can find Inkwell Games on at Inkwell Games, and also right now still on our website inkwellgames.wordpress.com.
Okay.
But it should be inkwellgames.com soon. Just taking everything one step at a time, and that's where you can find us. But I would recommend following us on Twitter or following me directly, if you like roll and ride games that are not so much per se the company, because I also just write about them. I don't do reviews. I just do lots of retweeting and talking about them when I get the chance.
All right, okay.
I've got a sort of like a reference book for roll and rides that I'm working on, that I'm going to put online at some point, about what are roll and rides, what are the games that are in it, what mechanics, whatnot. So if you're interested in all that kind of stuff, just a quick Twitter follow is usually the best way to go about it.
Okay, cool. Well, what we'll do is we will take those links and put them in the show notes so that we have notes to show. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, then go to the Googles, and if you search for We're Not Wizards, you'll find us on Twitter, you'll find us on Facebook, you'll find us on Instagram, you'll find our website, we'renotwizards.com, our blog, which is we'renotwizards.blogspot.com. There's a couple of articles that have gone up quite recently on them. If you want to check out, that'd be fantastic. You can catch us on the normal kind of podcast catchers, which is your Stitchers and Spreakers and Acast and Spotify and all those wonderful places. If you like what you've listened to tonight and you want to get in contact, you can send us a direct message through Twitter, because our DMs are open, and you can send us an email, which is magic@wearenotwizards.com. Or you can, well, if you like what you've listened to tonight, there's a couple of things you can do. You can tell other people about it. And the other thing that you can do is if you go to Apple Podcasts, you can give us a rating or a review. And as we say, if you are giving us a rating or a review, then don't give us 10 stars, because that'll make us big-headed. But at the same time, don't give us 1 star, because that'll make us cry. Give us something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average, and we're just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average tonight is rather wonderful, rather fantastic. Joey Schouten. Thank you very, very much for joining us, Joey. It's been an absolute pleasure. There's only 2 more things to do.
Yeah.
The first thing is to remember that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Joey?
No, we're not. We're not wizards.
Definitely. Say it. Can you say it in Dutch, please?
Oh, wow. Ja, we zijn geen tovenaars.
There you go. We zijn geen Hoffenhaus. There you go. Okay, and then I've just butchered that language completely. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Joey. Say goodbye, Joey.
Goodbye, everybody.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll 6s, and don't try and copy somebody who's just said something Dutch, because you've probably said something else instead entirely. But until the next time, goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.